I'll be reading the resolution tonight, 15A, which is the first step in Middletown creating an ordinance for honorary and historic street naming program.
Thank you, and I appreciate you giving me the time to tell his story. It's been a little bit of a journey for me. It's been about 3 years that I've been studying this individual, and I've traveled to study this individual. I've been in Massachusetts. I've been at the Library of Congress. But his name was Prince Mortimer. He was enslaved by a gentleman by the name of Philip Mortimer, who was a wealthy rope maker here in Middletown in the 1700s. In 1730, Prince Mortimer was captured off the coast of Guinea and brought to the Connecticut colony. And sometime in the 1750s, he was purchased by Philip Mortimer to work in that rope walk. And he worked in that rope walk for many decades. Late in life, when he's around 70 years old, and this, by the way, he says late in life that he was a part of the revolution. He was a servant to many officers during the revolution. But late in life, he's around 70 years old, and Philip Mortimer writes in his will that he's going to free him on his death. And when he dies, he doesn't, his son-in-law challenges the will, and instead of being freed, Prince Mortimer is now enslaved to his son-in-law, George Starr. So that is at age 70. He remains enslaved to George Starr for another 17 years until he's 87 years old. And at 87, George Starr accuses him of putting arsenic in his morning chocolate. It looked like there were some things floating in it, so he makes an accusation. Prince Mortimer is arrested and sent to prison for life at 87 years old. They sent him to Newgate Prison in East Granby. It was a pickle for Prince Mortimer, given that George Starr was a huge donor to the first courthouse here, and so was his prior enslaver, Philip Mortimer. So they were politicians, they were wealthy individuals, they were part of local government, and so that was something he could have never challenged. So he goes to prison. He remains at prison in East Granby. If you know anything about Newgate Prison in East Granby, the inmates were underground. And it was kind of a free-for-all down there, and they didn't really have beds. They created hay, and they laid on rock. And so at 87 years old, he's climbing down into this mine. He stays there until 1827, until they close down that prison, and he's moved to the new prison in Wethersfield, which is where the DMV currently sits in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And he stayed there until 1834. And while he was there, there were a few wardens that were a little corrupt, and so they would take the food that was supposed to be fed to the inmates, and they'd take it home to their families. And many of the prisoners fell ill. They were being fed spoiled food. The well was poisoned. They were getting sick from the water. And I was able to find, after some time, the prison hospital records that showed for over a year, Prince Mortimer, while at that prison, well into his hundreds, was in the prison hospital due to eating this spoiled food. So he's a part of this historic record of the prison and the investigations in it, and you can see he's suffering from it while he's in prison. At 110 years old, in 1834, he dies. He's said to have been buried at the prison cemetery in Wethersfield, which is today Cove Park, right next to Wethersfield DMV. But in working with some of the historians in Wethersfield, we were able to discover around that time period, there was a specific incident where the medical school, Yale Medical School, they needed bodies, so they were actually grave robbing, and they robbed a particular grave that caused a ruckus. There was a riot in New Haven over this, and so a new law was passed that now if they needed bodies for dissection, they would get them from the state prison. So it appears, based on my research, that he was then sent to Yale for dissection. So he actually never was buried. So it's a long story of being stolen, waiting for freedom, working diligently. He was a spinner in this rope walk. The rope walk existed where 545 Main Street, that office space currently exists. It's being redeveloped by J.R. Carnegie Hargraves. I'm actually working with J.R. Carnegie Hargraves because he's offered $25,000 within his redevelopment, to honor Prince Mortimer within that redevelopment. But that's where he worked for all those years on that particular land. His enslaver, Philip Mortimer, lived down, which would now be Rapallo Avenue, and where the railroad tracks are down that area. And Rapallo Avenue at the time was not a street, it was a walkway. And the walkway only led to Philip Mortimer's house. So every morning, Prince Mortimer would walk up what is current day Rapallo Avenue, make a left, and go to what is today 545 Main Street to work for decades. Because of that, I mean, I see him as a symbol of just continual endurance. Like, and you know, I've done a lot of research into my own family, and I found a lot of individuals that never got a lot of recognition. They weren't the exceptionalists. They didn't conquer any land. But I see them as extraordinary because their endurance allows for me to exist today. And that's how I see Prince Mortimer. So I'm hopeful that this new ordinance will allow us to do something to recognize this man who endured for 110 years here in Middletown by giving him an honorary street name above the road that he walked for so many decades. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Deborah and John, for that presentation, and we'll be taking that up further this evening as you reference resolutions and ordinances. I will recognize Councilwoman Blackwell first for item 15A.
Thank you, Your Honor. Approving an amendment of Chapter 262, Streets, Sidewalks, and Parking Areas of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Middletown, adding Section 262-15A entitled Honorary and Historic Street Naming Program, and I would like to speak to this, Your Honor.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Move approval, sorry.
No problem. You go right ahead.
Thank you. I just want to sort of echo, and if he's watching, our former councilman, Ed McEwen, we miss you too, or I miss you if you're watching, and I really appreciated your comments this evening. I recognize that at this point, this particular ordinance, as the others, have gone through GCC. I chair GCC, and so tonight, obviously, I'll be supporting this ordinance. But what I would say is that it's one of those things that I certainly want to spend some time exploring outside of, obviously, tonight's meeting. So I will support the honorary and historic street naming for Prince Mortimer this evening, and I'm probably pronouncing his last name incorrectly because I'm so tired. But I will say this, listening to the story about his life at GCC was really difficult. It's a beautiful story of resilience, but a very painful one. The thought of being in prison at the age of 87, just hard to wrap my head around, but it's a part of American history, so the story does need to be told. And so I appreciate Ms. Shapiro and Mr. Mills, all of your efforts to bring forward American history, which is, of course, Black history is a part of American history. So thank you so much. So I will be approving this ordinance this evening. And again, I'll say that it's an area that I think we should further explore because we're saying honorary, but is this something that we can move forward and make permanent? And I think we really need to take a serious look at making these types of ordinances permanent. That's my position. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion's been made and seconded. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? All abstaining? All right, matter passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And I will recognize Councilman Ford for